I have been very productive these past 2 weeks. Well, in terms of working on this project, not in terms of anything I'm supposed to be doing. God damn, I've been ignoring my homework. Anyways, back on topic. Let's start at the very beginning. If you didn't watch part 0, it's not necessary, but it is helpful for explaining some of the decisions I've made. Part 1. Stats. So I started by opening a new Unity project using the first-person base. I created a new script called Stat Manager and started making every single one of the massive library of stats I accidentally designed on my plan document. If you don't like the stats, don't blame me. Blame Brandon. I don't want a hunger, thirst, or heat stat either. But they're all used for Farrakhan, so I have to have them. Part 2. Pewter. After creating those stats and giving you some uses to health, I started working on Allomancy. I decided that it would make the most amount of sense to start with pewter because it's altering physical stats, which you already have to implement in order to actually use the game. So after implementing the effects on speed and jump height, I immediately threw out the one benefit I had from starting with pewter and started implementing the start of something that I think is quite unique to the way that this system is going to have to work. I decided to simulate the increase in dexterity and reaction time that pewter gives you with a small time dilation effect. This makes everything slightly slower, allowing you to react better to what you're doing. After that, I continued working on some other normal gameplay things like health and stamina, and then created a very weird effect. In the books, they talk about how you can brush off an attack that would kill them and then die later. So, to simulate this effect, I give a boost to health, right? I mean, kind of. I have to make a new stat called Pain Tolerance as well, which blurs your health a bit, making it literally harder to see how much health you have. This stat can also be stored in like ferrochemical tin. Increased by burning pewter or decreased by burning tin, which would simulate the effect that tin has of making you feel your pain more intensely. At this point, I realized that because of my planning, I could very easily implement Part 3. Lorazium. Lorazium is super easy to implement because I implemented a stat called Allomantic Strength. So all I had to do is see if you had some Lorazium stored, and when you were burning it, increase your Allomantic Strength on all the metals, making them no longer 0 if you don't have any. And while we're working on some really easy metals, Part 4. Aluminum. It's funny, because despite being almost opposites, code-wise, aluminum works in practically the exact same way as Lorazium. If it's burning, then it sets all the Allomancy stores to 0. Part 2. Again, pewter. At this point, I decided to work on pewter again. I made the burning effect on pain tolerance by centering the blur around the true amount of health, and by keeping the blur radius from changing as health decreases, which were problems the old system had. I then implemented fall damage, because that's actually a very important piece of Mistborn, because you're flinging yourself around at really high speed, so being able to take damage from that is kind of important. Part 5. Tin. I then decided to work on tin because it's another thing that affects pain tolerance, meaning I already had a starting point. So I made it so it decreases pain tolerance, made it so lights get brighter when you use it. And at this point, I realized I had to add a day-night cycle. Part 5.5. Day-night cycle. Because of the way tin works, I also had to make sure that there was a day-night cycle, which will be forever the most annoying thing, ruining so much of my testing. But the key way of getting the day-night cycle system to work is Part 5.5. Mist. I tried a lot of different ways to get the mist to work. First, I just wanted to use the fog feature that Unity's provided, but it didn't change the sky color, and changing the sky color made it so the sun no longer rendered, so that just didn't work. After that, I tried to use the volumetric fog shader that I downloaded, which looked good from a distance, but if you entered the mist, then it would stop rendering any of it, which is very annoying, because being in the fog is very important as Mistborn. But then I tried to make it using particles. But first the particles were 2D, so I had to increase the particle count from 1,000 to 10,000. But then I was like, I don't like these particles. They should be spheres. But rendering 10,000 spheres was very slow. So I attempted to decrease the particle count to 2, just to not have my computer die. But of course, it didn't select the 10,000 before I typed 2. So instead of switching the particle count to 2, it instead switched the particle count to 100,002. This required so much processing power, I couldn't do anything on my computer. No buttons worked, nothing rendered. Literally, I typed the button and my computer just froze. In the end, I had to hold down the button to get this to not kill everything. And that's why I have no footage of me working on tin, because that was all one recording that corrupted from me working on the mist. Anyways, after that, I tried using the volumetric fog again, after realizing that if you give it a plain fog shader and then rotate it by 90 degrees, make it perfectly to the camera, but for some reason, it caused a really weird line to be created at the center. I don't know why. Even now, still no clue why. But I realized that there is another shader I could give the same plane. I made a shader that creates fog using a tutorial I found on the internet. It doesn't get the noise of the other one, but that doesn't really matter. So anyways, that shader worked really well, and it changed the skybox properly. And I could just, when it turned on 10, decrease the alpha of that shader, and everything worked properly. Part 5 again. Tin. After adding mist piercing, I then added the particles to indicate where noise is coming from as like a visual indicator for people who don't have the best headphones. I also made some people glow when using tin, but I later removed that because it's really different to how it should work in the book. I also added in some bloom because it causes everything to look brighter and more reflective without actually adding more light. Part 6. Bronze. Bronze allows you to hear the origins. Since I haven't done anything with sound yet, I just use the same particles I used as the sound indicators, but with a different color. I then implemented all of the different elements of bronze burning. First, the particles go in or out, depending on if it's push or pull. Then slowing down or speeding up, depending on if it's internal or external. Lastly, the most complicated part, if it's physical, it has this pattern. If it's mental, it has this pattern. If it's enhancement, it has this pattern. And if it's temporal, then it has this pattern. If it's god metal, then it also has this pattern, but it doesn't really matter. Because if you're fighting someone who's burning in god metal, it's either ADM or it's going away in a single second. But let's take a short intermission of figuring out whether or not you can tell which metal is being burned. Comment how many you got right below. That one was zinc. There's gold. That's iron. That's bronze. That's iridium. And that's duralumin. And after that, I decided to work on duralumin. It should be super easy, since all I have to do is, if you're burning duralumin, increase the burn strength so you run out in 1 second. And because of the way tin works, this is what it looks like the best case scenario while burning tin at night. I now understand why I didn't react the way she did when she first burned duralumin, because damn, this is brighter than I was expecting. It also makes it so the pewter's jump height is so high and lasts so short. If you jump while burning duralumin flared pewter, you will die. Currently, however, death doesn't do anything other than completely stop you from moving, so it doesn't actually really matter. Part 8. Copper. For this, all I did was define points as copper cloud emitters and make it so the bronze pulses only get revealed if you have a stronger bronze than the copper nearby. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, which means I should really move on to something that's actually like super flashy and amazing looking to like show off how cool this is. So that brings us to part 9. Iron and steel. This is going to be very, very annoying. So first, starting up with basic elements, I made it so that there's a line that connects you to metal objects. I then added the pushing and pulling to the object, but at that point I could only change the value within like the editor and not actually within the game. I then got distracted forever by trying to make the line look nice with some noise. I still don't really like it, but whatever. I do think it's better when later I make the line thinner. I then made it so that the line alpha changed with distance. Then it was so if you looked at the object, it turned orange. At this point, I realized the way to do strength selection pretty easily. So if you're burning iron or steel while holding right click, then time slows. While time is slowed in this way, then if you're looking at something that has iron, you can press the left click and a little slider opens. By moving the mouse up and down, you can select the push-pull strength by moving the slider. It then applies a force to the player and object by using the weight for pushing and the weight for pulling. The weight is found by doing a ray cast to see if there's something in the way, and if that object is a rigid body, then its weight is added to the push-pull. Otherwise, if it doesn't have a rigid body, then it just gets an infinite weight, and that'd be like pulling against the side of like a concrete building. I then made it so that the force is determined by the distance between you and the object using a very weird equation. And so now you can grab coins and move them towards you, and the rate at which they move is also determined by the weight of the object. So a coin will move a lot faster than like this 500-pound block that I created, but it actually works really well. I spent like 3 days working on trying to make iron and steel just really nice to work with, so I sure hope it works well. Anyways, part 5.5. Again, mist modifications. So after that, I decided to make the mists look better by actually adding in noise to their appearance. And I switched it from a plane that's in front of you to a sphere that goes around you. That way, if you look around, the mists don't move. The mist noise doesn't move around with you. I don't really know how I feel like with this look. It looks a little visually cluttered. I can decrease the noise, but I don't know. Anyways, part 10. Next steps. So that's what I've been doing for for the past 2 weeks. My current plan is to implement all forms of allomancy, then start on 3D modeling houses where I can construct Luthadel. I'm pretty good on my progress towards that plan, but I'm planning on next time is adding an inventory system first, because making a merchant will greatly improve my ability to implement zinc and brass, because what I'm going to do is while talking to people who can push and pull on their emotions to get access to new text options or cheaper goods, and if you push or pull too strongly, then they'll stop selling things to you. And for those two as well, I'm also going to make it so you can make people fight each other by like pushing on anger or pride, make it so people can go to sleep by like smoothing fun or tension. I don't really know what else to do with that. It's really hard to implement zinc and brass in non-like story beat moments. After that, all I have though is the temporal metals, gold, electrum, cadmium, and bendoy, and the enhancement metals, chromium, and nicrosil. But for those last two metals, you're gonna have to implement the ability to make others be able to burn metals, and that's one of the reasons I'm actually starting with the elemency. A lot of the elemency effects require me to implement the other core systems in the game: movement, mist, allomancy reserves, any allomancers, social interactions, an inventory system, etc. The parachemical abilities are a lot weirder and less like applicable to main gameplay elements. And hemalurgy is like 99% just the other two types of magic, so I don't really want to implement that first. It would be very weird to implement that first. Yeah, I made a lot of progress. That's all for this update. I should be back next week with another update on how this is going. Signing off for hopefully not the last time. Someone who's never on topic.